Hello and welcome to the Gotham TV podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
And I'm one of your unfamiliar hosts, John, and that's only because I'm full of cold today, so I might sound a bit nasally.
Poor John.
Yeah, poor me.
Just wanted to welcome you guys to our third episode of our podcast, my favourite named episode so far. It's Gotham Year Zero, Episode 3, Batman Year 1. So lots of numbers in there.
What's that again?
Gotham Episode 3, damn it. I knew I couldn't get it twice in a row. What we're going to be talking about today is obviously our news. There's been lots coming up over the last couple of weeks since the last podcast. We're then going to be talking about a full review of the animated movie Batman Year Zero.
In that, we're going to be looking at the cast and characters. We're going to do a background and synopsis, and then we'll kind of have our general thoughts about the story, and then we'll kind of give it a rating, say whether we recommend it or not, and then we're going to just have a look and see whether some of this material from the Batman Year 1 animated movie could be used as reference material and source material for the TV show Gotham.
Yeah, how we think it's going to play into the TV show possibly. Yeah.
But the one thing we have to kind of just say up front and now is there will be spoilers, so prepare yourself for that if you want to listen to us, or read the graphic novel first or watch the movie first and then come back and listen to us and see if you agree with us or not. In relation to whether there's any spoilers on our interpretation of the movie with regards to the source for Gotham TV, we will know in time.
Absolutely. And now on to the news.
Now for a City Watch news brief here on GCN.
Okay, we've got lots of news this week. Firstly, for us, it's kind of some big news this week. We are now available on iTunes, which is obviously great for us. We're available on Stitcher for those of you who have Android devices or use Stitcher for your podcast tool. We've also got our RSS feed, which you can see through our website and get on pretty much any Android podcast catcher, I believe is the phrase that they're called. So you can pretty much get us everywhere now, which is awesome. Just particularly want to give a shout out to Franklin Mia, who's given us our first review on iTunes.
Yeah, thank you, Franklin.
It'd be great for any of our listeners to give us a review on iTunes. It helps other people find us. Particularly a positive review. If you want to leave a negative review, email us. Don't leave it up on iTunes. But no, obviously we want to have all your feedback, and it's great to see people out there enjoying us so far. John, your next bit of news?
Yeah, this week there was a little Clash of the Titans kind of action going on with the date announced for the Batman Superman movie or the Batman vs Superman movie. And there was a bit of confrontation between DC and Marvel here because the announcement was for the same day. Mark down the 6th of May 2016 in your diaries when Batman Superman will be released, but it's going to have a big clash in the third Captain America Marvel film. And so there was a little bit of action going on at a news conference there for the Winter Soldier. The only thing I can really say on this is that I love DC, particularly Batman and Gotham. I also love Marvel as well, in particular Doctor Strange. And as the Joker said, why can't these guys just learn to get along?
Yeah, I suppose what's interesting about the story really is that, you know, Captain America is only out in cinemas and it's in Ireland this week. It's coming out in America in a couple of weeks' time. Great buzz out there at the moment, so it's quite interesting. They up until last week, the movie itself hadn't been announced as being on the 6th of May 2016, but Marvel had reserved the date about 3 or 4 months ago, saying an unannounced project was going to be coming on that date. And then DC decided to move up the Batman Superman film, starring Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck. They've decided to move that to the same date.
That's great news for people that like comic books. There's 2 films. You can watch it all for the week leading up to all the Marvel and DC stuff, and then you've got 2 of your favourite movies probably in that year on the same day. Good things come in twos.
Absolutely. And let's just see how it goes, I suppose. But I think the piece from the press conference was Sam Jackson and Anthony Mackie, who plays the Falcon in Captain America, taking a bit of a swipe at DC's characters and DC's movie characters more so than anything else. Yeah, where they essentially said that they do love DC Comics because they've got great villains, but Marvel has great heroes, which is their little swipe.
So maybe it should be DC Marvel, and then you've got great heroes and great villains
on
all
the
in one
same
go.
day. Yeah, absolutely.
And complex characters such as Batman.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, we obviously love the heroes as well. So Right, on to our next bit of news, I suppose.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why we've been a bit delayed this week. We were intending to start recording last Friday, I think, about 4 or 5 days ago. And at this stage, we've started getting a lot of
official photographs
official
coming
photos.
through. These are being released sort of a drip feed on their Tumblr feed. And so we were treated to Donal Logue as Harvey Bullock, Cameron Bicondova as Selena Kyle, as the young Catwoman, Sean Pertwee as Alfred Pennyworth. And then the latest one, which was yesterday on Tuesday, was Robin Lord Taylor as Oswald Cobblepot.
Yeah, they're really giving us a good kind of feel of what the show's style is and what the characters are kind of looking like. There's a really the first photograph that we got with Donal Logue, which I love Donal Logue. I've been a fan of his for years, and just really interested in what he's going to bring to the show. He's as Harvey Bullock, but he looks like the grizzled detective.
Yeah, definitely. And he's got the leather jacket. There's a spotlight in the background across the skyline. He's got his GCPD badge on his hip along with his holstered revolver. So he's looking pretty good. Yet he looks like a weary sort of public servant. He's got the top button undone, the tie's down. He's like, want to get through the day, get my check, go home, maybe make a few bucks on the side, possibly. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Spoilers. And then on Monday, I think.
Sunday. It was Sunday. Yeah.
The next photograph got released, which was Cameron Bicondova as Selena Kyle. So our baby Catwoman, our cat baby, has been released.
And whoever's putting these pictures up is playing with the skyline at the back. Two of the tops of the buildings substitute the cat ears for Selena Kyle. But she's looking pretty good. Again, I mean, she's got a collar on, so maybe that's a reference to a kitty cat. She's in black. She kind of looks like that jewel thief from that shot, definitely.
Yeah, and she's definitely got that street urchin kind of vibe going on. The tights that are ripped, the hard edge to her, again in leather. You know, always black leather for superheroes is always the calling card, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
But yeah,
and so then on Monday, we had the release of Sean Pertwee as Alfred Pennyworth. You would immediately go, that's a traditional butler or kind of image. And that was something in our previous podcasts that we were kind of saying they maybe wouldn't necessarily go with, that it would kind of feed a bit from his ex-military past.
I think when we were chatting about it, you made a great point about his kind of look.
Yeah, and like immediately it looks slightly butlery in that sense, but also then it looked like that Victorian kind of police detective look.
A little Sherlock Holmes.
So, yeah, Sherlock Holmesy, but obviously without the tall hat. And then all of a sudden it made me think of British security service or secret service kind of personnel type of look, and that maybe that hints to his ex-military past. And of course, he's got a great expression on his face there, which just looks really resolute and determined. To me, I think we're still holding on to that prediction that maybe he's a bit more badass than the previous Alfred Pennyworths have been. But a great image, really good.
Absolutely, and I think, I think he could be. He could be great, but he'd definitely have to change his outfit to be a badass Alfred, to be honest. And then last night, when we were going to record the last one, we got our first proper villain from Gotham, which is Robin Lord Taylor as Oswald Cobblepot. And yeah, he looks creepy.
He looks very creepy. He looks
great.
Really good. For me, I really am looking forward to seeing how he explores this criminal from its early origins. I mean, he's one of Batman's oldest foes, and I'm really interested to see how he plays it. I think the image doesn't really show much. He's got his trademark bow tie going on.
He's like a mix of two of the Doctors. He's got his bow tie and he's got his messy hair like
yeah,
Chris Eccleston.
Yeah, and maybe
Matt
Sean
Smith,
Pertwee should have been doing that.
Maybe.
Maybe he's got a frilly ruff somewhere underneath. But, he's kind of got this sort of evil-looking grin on his face. How this all plays out with him, I'm really looking forward to that from the show. To be honest, again, nothing being done behind him. Maybe he's got an umbrella off shot or something. Then we're kind of really excited to see what other official pictures come out now for the rest of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the cool things that Gotham have been doing when they've been posting these photographs is giving us a little synopsis It's not something we haven't seen before, but giving us a little synopsis about each of the characters. For Oswald, he's the brains of a chess grandmaster and the morals of a jackal. So we know there's something odd about this cat, about this guy. It's interesting. Like, it's really enjoyable. Looking forward to seeing the next couple of photographs. One of the things definitely that we've noticed since these photographs are coming out, every outlet is getting more and more interested in the show. Every person I've seen comment on Twitter is getting more and more interested. Favorite post I saw today was about Robin Lord Taylor, and when will he get sick of people talking about how much his nose looks like a penguin, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah,
and the other
and
one
the zoo
night,
one as well. Yeah, exactly.
The zoo in Boston, who decided to put up a photograph saying, "Wow, he does look like a penguin, doesn't he?" Which is just great fun.
But that's it. As soon as you're associated with an animal, whether it's a cat, a penguin, you're gonna have people are gonna start to look into your features and go, "Oh, okay, I can see a bit of a penguin here, or a kitty cat, or whatever."
It's great fun,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great fun to have the speculation going on this early, and the excitement of people on the show seems to be already kind of building a bit.
Yeah, and I think overall, I mean, there's a dark element that runs through all these pictures. The city skyline in the back, that it's cloudy, it's punctuated by very harsh lights, it's dark. The characters are in muted tones. Maybe in terms of the tone of the show, it's going to be sort of gritty, sort of seedy kind of look to the show, which we were kind of thinking it might be.
Absolutely, and I think it's definitely set in present day. We know that, but there's definitely that style of a Boardwalk Empire or one of those kind of old gangster movies. It's very much that kind of style.
Really cool. The costumes certainly kind of look really stylized, but in terms of Alfred Oswald, kind of looks very classical dress, almost the Depression era type of American look.
Absolutely, and Harvey Bullock really does look like your proper Private Eye. He really looks like the old style Private Eye. I'm loving it. So these are being released about 5 p.m. Irish time every day, roughly around that time, which is I think it's about 10 a.m. some of the US states.
Yeah.
So
depending on where you are. Yeah.
So it looks like they're waking up in the morning, clicking the button, sending it out there, so all the press get the coverage of it all the dates. So my feeling is we've got about 3 more left to go. We're currently recording on Wednesday, so we've got one coming in about the next hour. We've got another one coming tomorrow, and we've got another one Friday. So I've got some guesses on who they're going to be and the order they're going to come in.
Okay, so for all of you at home, we have been having these predictions as to what order the remaining 3 will come in. At the moment, we feel that there's going to be another 3 released, so we feel that they're going to be Fish Mooney, Jim, and Bruce Wayne. I think that Bruce Wayne will be today. On Wednesday, It'll be Fish Mooney Thursday, and it'll be Jim Gordon as the main guy on the Friday. You were going to go with...
Yeah, no, I was thinking that it might be Jim Gordon today. They kind of got to get Jim Gordon out there. What? That's not news to you.
You see, I just know. He's the man of the show. He is going to be on Friday. Definitely.
Okay, all right. I don't know, I'm kind of thinking...
Best to last,
right.
maybe...
Yeah,
unless Will Smith is somehow pulling strings and he'll get his.
Jada Pinkett Smith is the most well-known actress of the
maybe.
lot, so she's probably. I'm thinking she might be the last release. It also could be that she could have a different look for the show. It could be something really different. We've seen some of the unofficial photographs that have been released, the set photographs that have been released of Ben McKenzie as Jim Gordon, and he doesn't look mad, crazy different. You're not expecting to have some kind of huge impact with that character. It's a possibility when you release a photograph of a 10-year-old as Bruce Wayne or Jada Pinkett Smith as Fish Mooney, a character we know nothing about and haven't seen anything of, that you want to make the impact on the last couple of days of doing this kind of broadcasting your official pictures. But that's just a guess, at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, as well, just quickly, there were quite a lot of unofficial on-set photos released as well that were obviously shot during filming. I would say treat them with a bit of caution. There's some images with a newspaper where potentially there's a bit of a spoilery headline. There's certainly a very upfront image of Bruce there. At the same time, though, there's some really cute images, I think, of the young Selena Kyle kind of, I think I said sliding down one of the New York fire escapes, the ones you have hanging off the buildings, but I think she actually might just be walking or running down it. But anyway, sliding sounds better, I think. And it seems like she's got a carton of milk or cream tucked sort of in her jacket. And then there's also another image where she's got a little alley cat sort of by the bins, sort of with a saucer. And, okay, they might be totally unconnected, but in my own head, when I saw these, I was putting up this image of her sort of running down the fire escape to give these alley cats a saucer of cream or something.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
it's a really neat way, if it's in the show at all, of just linking Selena Kyle to that history and mythos of Catwoman. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, and I'm making the assumption there's a lot. As I said, there was a lot of, or as John said, there was a lot of photographs released last week that were unofficial photographs of pretty much every character that we wanted to see, all the main cast anyway. But I have a feeling that a lot more of the sets are going to get locked down, so we're not going to get a huge amount of photographs over the summertime. There's just been a lot coming out last week, so it's quite fun. Yeah, I just have one more quick kind of question. So again, we've seen all what we thought was the main cast. We've done our cast episode already. There's a couple of other characters that have been kind of rumored.
Mooted.
Yeah.
Yes.
A couple of the characters rumored. So we've had Poison Ivy is the one
Yeah.
that seems pretty likely that there is going to be a young girl called Ivy. There's been mentions of it in script release, which was a leaked,
Yeah,
a
it was
leaked
kind of
release
a
of the
leaked
script.
script.
There's been a casting rumor that's up on IMDb that someone has been cast in the part. We're not
So
going
it's still to be
that.
confirmed,
Still
really.
to be confirmed.
Yeah.
But it is a possibility that we'll also have another young character playing the part.
So one of the things is, what other villains or rogues would you think might come up for the show?
Yeah.
Would it be a young Joker?
They have mentioned Riddler. They have mentioned Harvey Dent, not Two-Face, Harvey Dent, and they've mentioned the Joker, which would be, personally, I think, a very odd choice given the history of all the Batman films and all the Batman rogues gallery. Joker and Batman go hand in hand. How do you have a Joker without a Batman? He is the other side of the coin, essentially, to Batman. So how do you have a Joker without Batman? That is true,
but what about the assertions in the original Batman with Michael Keaton, where it could be that you had Jack Napier shooting the Waynes, Martha and Thomas, and that potentially he is the Joker?
Yeah.
From that traumatic incident that he is born,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's a long time to gestate, and for him to finally don the cowl and cape,
Yeah.
but they're linked from that moment.
Mm.
If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have Batman.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you never know.
Agree that, and that's a choice they may go down. I'm intrigued to see what they do if they do bring in Joker. Definitely,
But
I think
I agree.
that would definitely be a dancing on ice kind of choice to do.
I agree. To bring him in too early, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's just
Like
potentially too early and a bit too
And despite
controversial.
how amazing Jack Nicholson is in Batman, I think totally overshadowed Michael Keaton, unfortunately. But despite how amazing he was, the storyline of having him kill the parents and be the Joker was a huge step, and a lot of fans weren't happy with that. So I wonder if they'd tread that closely to that kind of storyline. But there you go. That was kind of I'm wondering.
So maybe give us your thoughts on who you think from the Batman gallery of villains, who you think might be within the Gotham show.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it would be someone from the Caribbean who's asthmatic in the form of a young Bane.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
Excellent. All right, I think that's it for the news for this week.
Yeah. Okay, so everyone, we'll be talking about and discussing Batman Year One, the animated movie, which was done by DC. And the reason why we kind of chose to do this was because we had noted that Ben McKenzie, now cast in the role of Jim Gordon, had also been involved in the DC universe by playing Batman and his alter ego Bruce Wayne. Or maybe that's the other way around, Bruce Wayne and his alter ego Batman.
Yeah, a lot of discussion over the years of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we decided we would have a look at this movie and give it a review and discuss it through, but also then towards the end just see maybe how it could be referenced by the TV show, maybe what it would borrow or honour or doff its cap to within the show.
And I think interestingly, we did talk about Year One before, but interestingly, this is really the first time that characters are seen as their younger selves or the starting out characters.
Exactly. And again, that's another link there is that you have generally younger versions of these characters that we know. Essentially, as a synopsis for the actual story, I mean, really we're talking about, and it's focused on two men. One being Jim Gordon, who's being introduced to Gotham. He's coming from outside and seeing kind of just the level of corruption and realizing that he must take a stand in his role as a detective within the Gotham Police Department. And then the other man being Bruce Wayne, who's being reintegrated back into Gotham after 12 years away and 18 years since his parents' death. And understanding how dangerous and corrupt the city is, but knows that he must, or he's resolved to take a stand. And we then see that journey of these two men interacting together and becoming that relationship of them working to solve and combat crime within Gotham, with a central focus of the corrupt Gotham City Police Department and the links with the mobs and
the gangsters. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fair to say, we've said it before, but just in case, if you want to go out and check out these, the movie's available pretty cheaply now. You can get it in a box set for €15. You can get the book. Again, it's available for digital download, or you can go and buy the book, and then you can come back to us if you don't want to be spoiled. But from now on, we're going to be talking spoilers. So.
One of the other things we also just want to mention is just the pedigree of the story of Batman Year One. And just the context of it. We have to doff our caps to Frank Miller, who wrote the original graphic novels that were released in 4 parts. We also have to doff our cap to the art done by David Mazzucchelli. Now, he was quite a young guy, new to the field, but he had already built up a reputation. Frank Miller already had that reputation, and he was kind of brought on board because at the time, DC were looking at all the origin stories of their heroes, Wonder Woman, Superman, and ultimately they came to the conclusion that for Batman, his story didn't require altering. But I think what Frank Miller, when he was asked to take on the role of writing about the origin that we know, it wasn't about changing it, but it was that it was to add additional depth to it, or complexity, or to broaden the context of Gotham in the whole DC universe.
Exactly, yeah. Like we know Frank Miller from a lot of other examples of his work, like Sin City, Watchmen, 300. You know, he's now a director, now done some films. But at the time, he was very young in the field in America. He'd written a lot of stories in the UK. But they were bringing him on board to essentially give his style and his stamp and his darkness to the work. And what we'll definitely talk about is some of the stuff that Frank Miller brought to this that other people wouldn't have brought. There's a lot of Frank Miller touches in here in some of the characters.
This was his first one, and this is what he was asked to do with regards to looking at this DC property. It came from, I think, certainly his work on Ronin, but then he went on to do Dark Knight Returns, of course, and the influence that had as well.
Yeah.
Sort of, year one, and in a sense, year 100, where, you have an older version of the Batman.
And we may cover that in the future. They've also done animated films of that, and it's some interesting stuff to cover. Yeah. So let's get into it. So cast, I think, is the kind of the big one here. So this is probably a pretty all-star cast for an animated film from DC. We've mentioned Ben McKenzie.
I think probably the biggest standout name here is Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
From, obviously, everyone knows him from Malcolm in the Middle. Sorry, I mean Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad, yeah, no. But both those shows, brilliant. Yeah, Malcolm in the Middle, Breaking Bad, certainly of recent fame. Who would have thought that he would go on to do Breaking Bad after Malcolm in the Middle? But brilliant. And a really good Jim Gordon through this movie. I have
to say, yeah, this we'll talk about it, but it's one of the best stuff. And then we've got Eliza Dushku, who's one of my favorites. Who's a former cast member of Buffy and Angel.
Is a Joss Whedon go-to.
Absolutely.
And she's the Selena Kyle and Catwoman.
Yep.
And then you have Katie Sackhoff as Sarah Essen within the movie, and obviously, Katie Sackhoff is Starbuck from the new version of Battlestar Galactica, who was brilliant in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some
remember,
really good
you remember how
actors
much
being involved in this animated movie.
Absolutely, and you remember how much backlash she took at the beginning of that show to playing a former male part and taking on the role. And
Exactly.
I love Katie Sackhoff, and just delighted to have her on board in this kind of.
And
process.
interestingly as well, I think we should mention at this stage is that Sarah Essen was invented by Frank Miller. This is her first outing ever.
That's right.
It's a new character.
And now she's going to appear in Gotham, yeah.
Yeah, now she's going to appear in Gotham. And then we have the two other main characters and cast of note are Alex Rocco, who plays Carmine Falcone, and he was in The Godfather, I think, as Mo Green.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And then John
Polito, yeah.
As Commissioner Loeb.
Yeah, and if you don't know who John Polito is, look him up on IMDb. You've seen his face everywhere as a detective. He's been the undercover detective in The Big Lebowski is probably my go-to for him. He was also in another couple of Coen Brothers films. Just one of those kind of stellar casts that you kind of go, how did they get these guys on board? But I think it's the quality of the material, the quality of the storyline brought all these people on board to do it.
So, really good cast. And then, again, obviously, there's a whole host of other casts involved there, such as Jeff Bennett, who's voicing Alfred Pennyworth.
But really, so I suppose let's get into it. I suppose this is, as John said, this is very much the story of the two main characters of Bruce and Jim in their first year of active service. But we do also get the creation of Catwoman and the introduction of Sarah Essen. So there's, a lot of introductions here, and that's what Gotham's going to struggle with.
And you have this idea of the mob. It's not about the costumed villains. Mm-hmm. It's about the mob. It's very much what Nolan was looking at, certainly initially, of being the base of this villainy, is mobsters and general sort of criminal bosses.
Absolutely.
Definitely runs through it. I mean, you immediately on the first few opening slides of this movie, you get that hint that Gotham City is not some kind of paradise.
Absolutely. Bruce
Wayne is flying in on a plane and he says, from here you don't see the danger that is lurking on the streets below. Mm-hmm. And you get that hint, you get the hint that Gotham is an aggressive place to live, that sense that it's aggressive. And you get that from Bruce Wayne arriving by plane, and you get that from Jim Gordon arriving on a train.
And Jim makes the comment that this is all he deserves right now. This is his time in hell. So Gotham is not a place that he wants to be. So why is Jim in Gotham, I suppose, is one of the questions.
Well, he's coming from Chicago, mm-hmm. from a previous police job. It's not like he's new to the police, mm-hmm. But he took down and implicated, and we don't know what for or why, but he essentially snitched up another police officer, another cop. Yeah. And that's why he's been transferred in. Mm-hmm. And you get to hear about this sort of when he's introduced to Commissioner Loeb. Mm-hmm. And Commissioner Loeb is welcoming him to the police department, essentially is saying, the thing that you did right was that you didn't allow the media to get involved. You kept it quiet. In all of this, you kind of get a fairly uneasy sense of who the commissioner is, mm-hmm. and what he's about. He kind of comes out with this really interesting phrase that the last thing on my mind is your honesty. The last thing on my mind.
Exactly.
Really good line.
Yeah, and we're also introduced to Detective Flass. He introduced Jim to the city. He's the kind of guide for Jim and the ways of Gotham. Teaches him the rules of Gotham and what it's like.
Ultimately, the only thing you can say about Detective Flass is he is a bully. He's corrupt, and one of the great lines that he comes out with is,
"Welcome to Gotham, Lieutenant. Don't worry, not as bad as it looks, especially if you're a cop."
It's this sense of that we're a team. I slap your back, you slap mine, and we'll all get along just fine. Mm-hmm. And a really interesting introduction to Flass after he's met Jim Gordon at the railway station. Not only does he just wipe out a Hare Krishna monk or something like mm-hmm. that. I mean, poor guy. They're in the car traveling, I think, to the Gotham Police Department. And he just stops. And I think you said it was like reminiscent of The Wire almost.
Totally. The actual setting of the scene just reminds me of Bunkin McNulty cruising the streets of Baltimore, going to the kids and beating the crap out of them for the drugs that they may be selling on the side of the
And
street.
you have this great scene where Jim Gordon is just sizing up Flass, and he's saying, just watch, just wait, don't do anything yet, don't get yourself sort of back into trouble. And I don't know, part of that anyway, in my mind, was, does this mean he's kind of been planted there almost to investigate any possible corruption?
Yeah.
It kind of hinted at that, but I mean, I'm not entirely sure whether that's the case or not. He just watches Flass doing his thing and says, just watch, wait, size him up and figure him out before you start doing anything. And that's a really, really good scene to introduce Flass in, but essentially he's a bully who takes backhanders. Really.
Absolutely. Kind of interesting seeing Jim's take on it, as you say. He's watching the whole time, but I don't know whether he's a plant. I think it's very much that's just Jim Gordon. He's watching out for the corruption that's going on in the city. This is something that was taken into the Batman Begins world, the Batman, the Dark Knight world. It was taken and given as a storyline to Harvey Dent. It's very much what Harvey Dent did with the police force, was look at them, investigate the bad guys that were within that police force to make it better. And this is Jim's story within the year one.
With Flass, he calls Jim Gordon Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, hey, don't worry about it, Jimmy. And you can just see within the animation that this is really irritates the hell out of Jim Gordon. And we don't really we see Batman arriving at the airport, for example. There's, again, further insinuation that Commissioner Loeb is not as honest up front as he should be, because he's talking about the insinuation of corruption being dropped because of the key witness going missing. So that, you suddenly start to realise that both Jim Gordon is entering into this real world where there's a lot of questions about the people who police the neighbourhoods and the city, and Batman returning to a city which, in a sense, that's not a surprise for him. He feels now is his time to come back and do something about that. One of the things quite early on in the movie, and it's just really to say that the movie is split up into different dates, so it almost takes a full year. So
it's a structure that they'll use in a couple of the Batman comic books. Some of the really interesting ones that we'll probably cover in the future.
But at this stage, Batman, and I think it's on the timeline of February the 4th still, if I'm right, just before Feb 12th, is that for Batman, it's not about healing and it's not about closure, but I'm not ready yet. So the question is, what is it about? Mm-hmm. Is it about vengeance, pure and simple vengeance?
What's he going to do?
Or retribution for what happened? Mm-hmm. There's something. He's got the skills. He has the money and the resources. Yeah, he kicks down a tree.
That's pretty cool.
So he's got the skills.
Absolutely.
There's something there in his mind that he says, I'm still not ready to do what I feel I need to do.
Mm-hmm. You see Bruce taking his first step into the world of the future Batman, his first step at seeing what he's going to do. So he puts his first costume on, which is interesting, because it's the smallest costume you could possibly imagine. Yeah. Not in a skimpy way. Smallest costume you could possibly imagine. It is, what he says in his internal monologue is that if you give someone a piece to concentrate on, they'll forget all your details. So he puts on a scar on his face.
And he wears a beanie hat, and he heads down to sort of Prostitute Row, essentially, which is another Frank Miller trait, kind of little trait, that seediness, even just Sin City, you'd think.
Yeah. It absolutely reminded me of Girl Town from Sin City, where all the characters, all the kind of female hard-ass characters live, you know. There is a pimp, for want of a better word, but the women are definitely in control in that area of town. Really just gave me that kind of feeling.
Exactly, but Bruce has a shocking night. First of all, it's like his costume looks so like the Vice Squad that he gets called out. Immediately, he gets into a punch-up with the pimp. Mm-hmm. He gets knifed by Kelly. Kelly is Selina's sort of friend.
Selina Kyle's young friend. Yeah.
Young friend, and they kind of work together. He gets knifed by her, and it's your first introduction to Selina. Mm-hmm. She, out of the window, comes down and goes, what the hell's going on? We've paid up to Vice. what are they snooping around for, and gets involved. And essentially the first meeting of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle by way of fists and high kicks, really.
Yeah. Selina Kyle in this version is definitely in her mid-20s. Bruce is definitely in his early 20s, maybe. Definitely maybe. Jim Gordon is, young 30s, maybe. They're much later age groups than we're going to see in a TV show. But this is all their first experiences and first meetings.
If having a punch-up, getting stabbed, having a punch-up again with Selina Kyle isn't bad enough, the cops arrive and he gets shot. Mm-hmm. And they actually arrest him. It's that point where you feel it could have finished before it began if this was reality. I'm talking about reality now rather than pretend that, if someone wanted to be a Batman, his cover could have been blown, but they don't identify him at all. And he ends up getting taken away in a police car, which ends up then getting blown up. But it is not a good evening for Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, but there is a very important moment in there for Bruce. So Bruce in the back of the car, the police that have taken him away start joking about the fact that they've caught another one of these crazy mental patients, essentially, from a former war. They get attacked, the car blows up, and Bruce saves them.
Yeah.
He doesn't let them die.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental part of the Bruce Wayne character
and Batman.
Yeah.
And he says, even corrupt cops have families, and he saves them.
Yeah.
It's not only Bruce. Is it a parallel between these two characters? Because at the same time, then, you have Jim Gordon. He's not having a particularly good evening as well. He's just finished work, so you've done a 9 to 5, yeah,
or a 9 to 9,
or a 9 to 9.
Do,
You head down to your car. There's a group of 5 people decide to take a swing at him. Mm-hmm. He gets involved in a fight in the basement, but the thing is, he hears the boys can count on you now, can't they, Jimmy? And Jim knows who it is, so they're all masked up. They're in black, they've got a balaclava on, they've got baseball bats, and they're beating and kicking and hitting the crap out of him. Flash says, we can count on you now, can't we, Jimmy?
Yeah, why wear the mask?
Yeah. And he from that point, Jim Gordon knows that Flash was involved.
Yeah, and he knows he's on the outside, too.
He knows this is a club. He knows that the police department is essentially a club.
Not like a baseball bat.
Not that type of club, no.
Right.
Or like a Penguin's biscuit. But it's a club, and it's one that you have to be a member of if you're going to get anywhere in that club.
Yeah. And
it brings us then into a really interesting part of the story of Jim Gordon, where he goes and gets revenge on Flash. It's kind of interesting when you move further along in the story, because he does what Batman is trying to do, which is get revenge or vengeance. Jim Gordon is trying to stop him.
It's been years since I had to take out a Green Beret. Even so, he deserves a handicap.
Jim Gordon follows Flash out to a house where he's got a card game. He's got a poker game with some of the police department. He crashes him off the road. This is a feeling of justified revenge. He's threatened Jim Gordon in the car park, threatens his wife and their unborn kid. It's justified revenge, and actually it's pretty brutal. Jim Gordon just goes for it, and it's repeated punching, and you could argue vigilante behavior, which is what he tries to stop, or he thinks that Batman is doing later on in the movie,
and in the years to come. Yeah, absolutely.
And he finishes with the line of "Stay away from Barbara and my unborn child." Mm-hmm. He knows that underneath Flash is that bully element of he's not going to report it because he's being humiliated. I mean, he gets it kicked out of him big time. Yeah.
And the internal monologue comes back, and he already is predicting that Flash is going to say it was 6 people that jumped him and beat him to a pulp because he couldn't ever admit that was only one person, especially someone like Jim. Yeah. And then we go back to Bruce's story. Bruce sitting at home with a bell beside him where he could ring for Alfred.
He's come back from having rescued the cops and escaping the burning vehicle. And he's sat there, and this now comes into a part where I think it's quite... From the animated movie, you don't get the sense that maybe he's hallucinating or anything. It's almost like a hallucination that's happening. It's kind of slightly weird. I think you get the idea that that's happening more so from the graphic novel. And it's a very Frank Miller type of thing to do as well.
It looks very like he's released the artist to do what they want to do with the scene. Yeah, definitely. In the comic or the graphic novel, yeah, I definitely see it. I suppose you've got Bruce. He's at home. He's shot. He's beaten. He's broken. He's sweating. He's close to death by the look of it. He's close to giving up anyway. At the very least, he calls out the fact that he has a bell beside him which he could ring, and Alfred could come in and tend to his wounds.
And you get a flashback.
You get the anime flashback, which is my favourite piece of the animation, I must say. The flashback to the death of Bruce's parents, which is told in a very anime style. It seems different to the rest of the film. One of the pieces that I feel about the animated film is that it feels like a motion comic, which is essentially where you take the panels of a comic book and put them up on screen without much background animation. Only the character will be moving, though. It won't be much going on in the background.
Yeah, the backgrounds are relatively static and so on.
And it doesn't look like the Year One comic book. There's a very distinct style between the two.
Yeah.
But this flashback sequence of Bruce's is probably the standout moment of the animation itself for this film.
Yeah, so you get the flashback, and maybe it's that idea that he thinks he's close to death. He has been punched, shot, involved in a car crash. He's dragged himself back to Wayne Manor. He's collapsed in a chair, and he has an hallucination. He may be in and out of consciousness. He has a flashback to his dead parents. Before you know it, the answer to his previous questions of, I have the resources, I have the skill, there is something else that I need, comes in the way of a bat crashing through the windows of Wayne Manor, sitting atop a bust of his dead father, screeching at him, and the realization, this is what I now need to do. And I think that certainly draws from the Nolan films as well, just as a point of reference, that idea, I know now that I have to have a symbol to intimidate or for my vision of what I need to do in order to honor my dead
Absolutely,
parents.
and drive fear into the hearts of the criminals of Gotham. Yeah.
Or even whether it's that in his mind it is his father answering him back via this bat, because I think he talks about, I now know, you've told me what I must do, I now know what I must do, and kind of thing.
And again, I definitely feel that's a Frank Miller touch. There's a certain psychosis to a lot of Frank Miller's characters that he's created. There's a certain unusual psychological behavior that they have that I think Frank Miller really brought to the Bruce Wayne part here. There probably isn't evidence in many other graphic novels that have been written. He is slightly psychotic. He is a vigilante. He feels he's totally justified 12 years after the death of his parents taking out that vengeance on every criminal in the city. So it's an interesting piece that Frank Miller definitely brought on board to the character.
That's one of the main points within the film, and it then moves on, and we now come to a point where in the movie it's April the 4th. There's a few short, sharp dates, April 4th, April 5th, April 6th, and you get introduced to Brendan, the SWAT team officer. This kind of reinforces the extent of corruption and the infiltration of corruption of the mob into the GCPD. Then we see this hostage situation playing out that Jim Gordon has been asked to look over. You have Brandon then, who's the SWAT team guy, who is coming in essentially all guns blazing. Who cares? It may be innocent kids up in the room being held by, I think, sort of a criminal, someone from Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Just go in, all guns blazing.
He's very much a shoot first, ask questions kind of guy.
And Jim Gordon is like, you just chill the jets, calm down, and goes in and recovers this hostage situation and saves the kids, and ultimately starts to get this good press. So the Gotham Gazette reports about Jim Gordon and the success of him saving these children, and it kind of
finally doing some police work.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, after however long he's been in, like a good couple of months, getting down a bit of good police procedural. And it kind of skips forward then with April 5th, and there's it's just a series of animation where it's increasingly getting the impression from discussions between the Commissioner Loeb and this Brandon guy, I think he's a captain in the SWAT team, where, they're viewing Jim Gordon as increasingly as a threat. He's being viewed as kind of outside of this club or the corrupt setup, and he's not really playing ball. And then you kind of move into April 6th, you get one of these really good monologues, these Jim Gordon monologues that are kind of, I think there's 2 or 3 of them spaced throughout the movie, and it's really good. It's almost a bit of a breather from the animation, and he kind of goes, I hate the job, I hate the gun, but I keep practicing. It's like it's in his blood. He just does it, but he doesn't necessarily enjoy it as such.
I hate the job. I hate the gun. But I keep practicing. How did I let this happen? To bring an innocent child to life in a city without hope.
That's a really depressing sentiment.
Absolutely.
And it's maybe just that realization of
what's he let himself in for? What's he letting his family in for?
Yeah.
But it's one of the fascinating things. Like, I've listened to a lot of interviews with Batman authors and authors of the comic books, and one of the things they talk about, the pleasure of writing Batman, is writing his internal monologue and writing the internal monologue of that character, because you don't get to know who Batman is a lot. He doesn't have a lot of interaction with other characters, doesn't have a lot of conversations with other characters. And one of the things that Frank Miller's doing here is also giving that internal monologue to Jim Gordon. So you get to know that character a lot better. It's really great that they're able to bring that into him.
Yeah,
as well.
one of the interesting things is that that's captured very well in this movie. You don't really get an awful lot of Bruce Wayne and a sense of Bruce Wayne or a sense of Batman. Like, I mean, what I mean by that is you get a sense of what Batman's trying to do, and you recognize that and you understand that. It's like a person in school or a friend who you know to a certain extent, and then beyond that, it doesn't go any further.
Yeah.
And you get that impression quite well.
Yeah, I think to speak back to the recreation of the character and the recreating all of the DC characters at the time in the early 80s and mid 80s, they had said they didn't want to recreate Batman. They liked his origin story. They just wanted to flesh out a bit more. And I love the idea that Frank Miller's decision was, well, let's flesh out the rest of the universe of Gotham. They got the characters around Batman.
Yeah. Which gives the character understanding.
Exactly.
And it's interesting, with this monologue then, you actually get the first talk from Jim Gordon of this, and in quotes, a giant bat. So it's, the bat has been spotted.
Yeah.
And you move to this first interaction of Bruce Wayne in his cape and cowl and his first foray onto the streets, just dealing with some low-level kind of
people robbing a TV.
Criminal,
people robbing a TV. Basically, it's out comes Batman. Can you imagine? Like, you know,
it's not the mobs. It's not the mobs. It's not a flamboyant villain. It's not a. It's almost like a bunch of kids actually going and just doing sort of something they know is naughty and they shouldn't be doing, but it's like a dare almost.
Yeah,
it's
robbing a TV is still pretty.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. And you see this interaction play out, and even though these aren't the most sophisticated criminals, he's lucky to beat them down, and he says it afterwards, I'm a lucky amateur.
Yeah, he's almost killed twice,
Yeah,
isn't he?
yeah.
He almost gets knocked off a balcony and almost kills one of the kids by mistake again. And then, as you say, he ends it with lucky amateur. God, how did I get away with that?
Exactly. And with the introduction then of the Batman being spotted and straight from the comic, but you get this 3 panes of the bat and so on, and it reminds me again of Nolan, where you've got Bigfoot up on the thing about, well, who is this guy? And they've got a picture of a bat and so on. But not only do you get introduced to Batman, it's the first sighting of Batman, but then we get introduced then to Detective Sarah Essen. And
she's a Gothamite. She's from Gotham, right? In this storyline, she's a local who's being promoted in the department, but none of the rest of the department have seen her as
and she's
a
sexy.
detective. And
she gets wolf whistles. She's been wolf whistled by.
Does that mean she's sexy, or does that mean that the guys are just?
It doesn't happen in my workplace,
right?
Put it that way, and it shouldn't, and it just wouldn't. But it's like, they're much chilled back, much kind of early 80s kind of, employment laws, I think, going on in Gotham.
I think it's pretty relaxed around Bruce Corrupt.
Yeah, and you start to hear that 70 assaults have been reported, and they actually seem to think that he's a mob boss.
As we talked about earlier, Jim always expected that Flash was going to blame his beatdown on a group of people. This is Flash's perfect opportunity. He blames it on the Batman and says, "Oh, it was Batman that got me." It was Batman that attacked me and beat me up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Flash is in crutches and he's got a neck brace on, so he's still suffering from. That's how badly Jim Gordon smacked 7 bells of whatever out of him. I don't even know.
7 rings a bell.
Yeah, something like that. That's kind of left there that, the cops and the police are starting to get interested in this idea that there's someone out there in a costume and he's a bat or he looks like a bat and so on. He works at night and so on.
And I have to say, I know you mentioned it, but I love the drawings in the background of the artist's impressions of Batman. It's something that's kind of carried through for years of the when people are trying to find the bat. There's a picture of a man with bat wings. There's a picture of a feral bat with human legs. There's something resembling a guy in a suit. But it is very, it's very different. It's a completely differing perspective on what they've seen, and that's always been the thing with Batman, is to make sure he leaves them with an indelible image, but they might not be sure what it is.
Then there's a jump there, and that's to May 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of one of the first reveals, actually. I mean, it's hinted at, obviously, and I don't think it's any great surprise or reveal. But you suddenly realise the level of the corruption and at what level it reaches within public office in Gotham. When you suddenly move to the mobster, the Roman, Carmine Falcone.
Yeah.
Having a dinner party, and it's guess who's come to dinner, and there is the police commissioner.
Yeah, Commissioner Loeb is right there. Yeah.
Exactly. It highlights the level of corruption that's occurred. Yeah. And they're having this conversation where there's this Batman and he's costing them money.
Yeah, and I think the impression that's given is it's not just Commissioner Loeb that's there. It's not just the Falcone family that's there. It's not just the mobsters. It's also the elite of Gotham. This is their dinner table that they regularly meet at. It's not a special request that Loeb is going to be there for this particular dinner. It's something that they regularly meet and provides the corruption of Gotham at the highest level, essentially.
Exactly, and it becomes, and I think within the graphic novel, it's war is declared. Mm-hmm. And you have immediately Batman making a statement to these people, the elite of Gotham, which is that none of you are safe.
Exactly.
You have for too long brought the city down, the people of the city, the good people of the city down, and this has to stop. And you become clear on the intention of what Batman is about, that his idea is about not revenging specifically his mum and dad, but it's trying to honour the memory of what they tried to do from a philanthropic point of view.
Absolutely.
And that these people are eroding and undermining that through corruption, backhands, and an unequal playing field. And that has to stop, and none of you are safe.
Exactly. It's very much you think you're above the law, I am the law.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the new law in Gotham, yeah.
And obviously this then doesn't go down very well.
That was a bit Judge Dredd there.
That was very Judge Dredd.
But yeah, very, very much that he won't turn a blind eye to the politicians, he won't turn a blind eye to the elite. And this is something that was picked up by Chris Nolan and given to some of the characters in Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. It was very much the idea of the elite versus the poor. The elite versus the downtrodden, if you will, who eventually rise and take over Gotham. So this is another touch point for him.
And who anyway likes then to have their 5-course dinner interrupted by a light show, smoke show, and a threatening voice. Yeah. And in which case then you have in very quick succession this idea that Jim Gordon is given then this task by the commissioner to track down the Bat, find out who he is, and to bring him into custody, or maybe to actually just kill him and get rid of him, full stop. And you move to this really wonderful then scene of an attempt to entrap the Batman, where you just get this voiceover of Batman saying, She walks like a lady. She screams like someone being robbed, and she
knows how to scream.
Yeah, she knows how to scream, and that I'm not falling for it basically. And it's a great little scene actually, which is kind of it's really wryly kind of done, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's just a really nice little point within the movie.
Yeah, where Essen is pretending to be a girl that's about to be beaten or raped or something. Yeah,
and then you kind of that's really interesting where they're trying all their little tricks and Batman is clued in on this, and then you get a bit more of an idea. Then it kind of jumps to June the 5th and about this tit for tat kind of going on. So Falcone's tied up on his bed and his Rolls Royce has gone and it's been dumped in the river. And obviously, again, you've spoilt my dinner party. You've nicked my motor. And he's tied up like a turkey, trussed up like a turkey on his bed. So we start to get this idea that the mobsters and their influence within the police do not want this guy around because he's making them look bad, and he needs to get removed from the equation.
And they just don't seem to be able to do anything about it.
No. And we then get acquainted very briefly, and it's only a brief appearance really, and he doesn't appear anywhere else, but you suddenly come into Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
And primarily because Jim Gordon is checking him out to see whether he is a suspect with regards to being the Batman. That's as far as it kind of really goes with Harvey Dent. But it's
the only introduction to the White Knight of Gotham. But but again, it's probably something that's been mentioned in various other sources that Harvey Dent is seen as a potential Batman because of his thoughts about the society of Gotham and the fact that he wants to clean it up quite a lot, But it's the first meeting of Batman and Harvey Dent.
Then Detective Essen is a smart cookie, we find out. We find out that she really not only looks good, she's got, her flowing hair and so on, but she's got a lot of brains, and she links Bruce Wayne to Batman. Her and Jim Gordon are in the car, they're talking about Dent, whether Dent is Batman, whether he equals Batman, and then they start saying, well, this guy will need a lot of money, his parents were killed, there's a motive behind this, so the nub of this idea from Detective Essen that Bruce Wayne could potentially be Batman. So she's a clever cookie.
And it's very much it comes across that because she's the local girl, she knows about Bruce. She knows that he's the heir to a fortune. She knows he has the money because of that. And Jim wouldn't know that because about it. He's out of town,
Exactly. They see this van out of control. It's careering towards an old lady with pushing a shopping trolley. Jim Gordon tries to, or a hobo, Jim again tries to rectify that and save the day. And again, I think it's one of the interesting sort of parallels between Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne / the Batman is that they're both trying to do good. You have this both idea of them coming to for the first time or returning to Gotham and understanding what it's about, but then this idea of at least trying to do a job to help and make things better. And it ends up with Batman saving the old lady from the oncoming truck, ploughing into her. Essen essentially holds a gun up to the Batman, but the cat that comes in and meows distracts Essen.
Yeah.
Batman managed to knock the gun away and to escape down an alley as police support arrive.
Yeah, and the cat's appeared a couple of times during
and this is a really interesting thematic motif of this cat, which appears at the hostage situation that Jim Gordon resolves earlier on. This cat becomes the reason for Batman essentially escaping Detective Essen. And then the cat then appears in the hostage situation where Batman is the hostage surrounded by the police and the SWAT team after this escape from Essen appears within there. And it's an interesting link and a thematic link, I think, between the Batman and Catwoman.
Absolutely.
Because almost just after that, you do get Selina indicating that they're going to get out of their current line of work, which is essentially prostitution, we're going to move on to another line of work
Yeah.
as she pulls out the cat suit.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting little thematic touch, I think, that Frank Miller runs through this story. And is captured by the animation. But you end up with Batman holed up then in this derelict house, and Brandon pops up again.
The SWAT team
And
arrived,
the SWAT
yeah.
team. There's Commissioner Loeb in a helicopter, and I mean, I don't think the police in any other city would do this.
Mhm.
But a firebomb is dropped onto the house.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of like, you know, there's current debates about whether water cannons should be used. And, you know, okay.
This was the 80s, though.
Yeah, I know this was the 80s, but it wasn't that bad.
You remember the Thatcher riots?
Yeah, but I don't think firebombs, I mean, maybe she decided not to do it.
Maybe.
But, you know.
Maybe it was the cold.
They chuck a firebomb onto the building, and then the SWAT team goes in, and it's basically Commissioner Loeb's sort of shouting through the comlink to Brandon, I want a corpse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's gone way beyond tit for tat. It's
Yeah.
like, we want this guy dead. He's making us look seriously bad and affecting our business interests, you know? Batman picks off the SWAT team one by one.
Yeah, and it's really, really cool. The dynamicness of the animation is really good here, where it's where Batman is trying his best at a very early stage in his career. At this stage, you know, trying his best to pick off each individual member of the SWAT team. He gets caught very quickly. He then hides. He gets another one or two of them, and then there's an all-out brawl essentially between the SWAT team and Batman.
You know, he gradually takes them down one by one, and then he gets introduced. You get introduced to the bat sonar.
Yeah.
That attracts the bats, and this was
The
used
first of it,
in Batman Begins by Nolan, where
The first
and
of
that
Batman's
essentially
gadgets, yeah.
helps him to escape. But before that, Brandon gets punched out of one of the boarded up windows,
Mhm.
and Jim Gordon essentially says, because there's a crowd developed at this stage, and he says, "We've made a hero out of it."
Yeah.
The bats come from the sonar, and this allows Batman to then escape from the building after biting all the people that were cheering him on. You get the line, "We've made a hero out of him." Next thing, they all need tetanus injections because they've been bitten by a load of rabid, kind of like disgusting bats. And so on.
Disgusting bats.
You know, so kind of an interesting thing, because you see that this war that has been established has gone beyond simply arresting him. They want him taken out, and that's what's going to happen.
But they don't get the opportunity. And as we get into the final section of the film, it's all about Gordon and his relationships with Barbara, who's about to give birth to his first son, and with Sarah S. and his compatriot, the person who's been helping him investigate the Batman and helping him work on the crime families. They go for coffee after work.
In Hopper's bar, which is a reference obviously to Edward Hopper, and kind of fits in with
Looks
that.
exactly
yeah.
like the
Night Owls picture over coffee. Certainly for colleagues in such a pressurized environment, it's only their colleagues that can understand what it is they have to face day in, day out. They make that connection.
Mind if I ask you a personal question? I know why I'm here, but what are you doing here? In Gotham, I mean.
It's a long, sordid story. The bullet points are police corruption, a cop who wanted to believe the system works, and one incredibly bad decision. There's a reason everyone hates internal affairs. They dangle the carrot of integrity and honesty, but at the end of the day, when you take down another cop, they treat you like any other low-life scumbag.
It also begins to escalate. They kiss. You get another one of these monologues, which is really
you very much see the toll that it starts to take on Jim. You know, who has been the central kind of moral ground within the police force, and then suddenly he's thrust himself into the position of an adulterer.
Yeah, I mean, there's this wonderful image where Barbara's fast asleep on the bed at night. She's heavily pregnant at this stage. Jim is sat up in bed in the middle of the night, and he starts to have this internal monologue goes on where you get to view his thoughts. And I mean, you know, Bryan Cranston plays this complex character really well.
Mm-hmm.
He's an anti-hero in a sense because, he's an adulterer, sorry. He's kind of done vengeance on a fellow cop, but he also has an ethical center that surrounds the job. But it begins to turn apart. It's like, I must come clean with Barbara. And then it's like immediately his thoughts flip to, I can't stop thinking about the Batman. It has this internal sort of conflict within him then about his job. He's just kind of been thinking about how he's cheating on his wife with his colleague, and then it's immediately back to the job.
But I can't stop thinking about her. Like I can't stop thinking about this Batman. He's a criminal. I'm a cop. It's as simple as that. But I'm a cop in a city that uses its cops like hired killers.
Really, really good line, and really sums up that conflict between Jim's personal and professional life. You kind of see this escalation of the affair with Essen from there until they're back in Hoppers, and Jim Gordon breaks the affair off.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain Essen says, would you be doing this if your wife wasn't pregnant?
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting point because in the comic, Sarah Essen is Jim Gordon's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara is his ex-wife.
Yeah.
So, that sexual tension or that relationship that occurs in these pages has shaped the story of Jim Gordon and essentially his love life within the Gotham universe and the Batman universe quite strongly.
Absolutely.
There's a really deep emotional sort of relationship that's developed here. But ultimately, Sarah Essen is requesting a transfer.
Yeah.
And you don't see her from then on within the story.
Yeah. So I suppose back to the fundamental part of the story, So the interesting one here, Flass, who we haven't talked about for a while. Flass is involved in a criminal act, is caught in the middle of it and arrested for his participation. One of the other gang members, essentially one of Falcone's gang, is caught and doesn't want to give any kind of testimony. Is advised by his lawyer that they'll be able to get him off, but Batman intervenes.
Yeah, Batman intervenes in order to get the confession out of the criminal. Yeah. He essentially chucks him through a coffee table, and Bosch, you have
Flass taken
down. He gives the confession to the lawyer.
Yeah.
And then you get that intersection of Jim Gordon's professional and private life once again, where it's used as leverage by Commissioner Loeb and Brandon.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Who know how much Flass know about them, and know about their situation.
So, it suddenly becomes crucial that Jim Gordon is neutralized in some way, and it involves essentially blackmail. And Commissioner Loeb pulls out this paper. It's almost taunting Jim Gordon, saying, you've become a bit of a celebrity, you're on the front of this newspaper. And he pulls the newspaper away, and underneath there's a picture of him kissing Sarah Essen.
Yeah. Yep.
And he says, does your pregnant wife want to know about this? And it then has this moment where you see that Jim Gordon's conscience, he knows he must tell his wife, but all of a sudden they go off to interview Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. Yeah.
To see whether he again still may be Batman. There's still that inkling there, and it ultimately comes away with Barbara. Barbara essentially says he's a sleazy, womanizing scumbag. He's a pig.
Yeah,
or
at least he acts like.
Yeah, or at least he acts like that.
Yeah,
and that's the impetus. Those few words, the impetus were Jim Gordon comes clean to his pregnant wife and confesses. About
to the affair,
to the affair, and then you get the birth of their kid, and then it starts to move quite quickly towards the end because this becomes then the next level of leverage for Commissioner Loeb and Brandon to essentially try and get Jim Gordon to pull the investigation into Flass. That internal affairs are doing.
Yeah, but there's a good little tete-a-tete right in the middle of it, where right in the middle of the situation, just as a kind of a side story about Catwoman, where she's starting to go out on her rampage and stealing from Commissioner Loeb to begin with, starts stealing from Falcone, but every time she goes to steal, everybody just assumes that the costume firstly is Batman, and then that she's Batman's assistant, which drives her up the wall, I suppose. To think that she's planned all these crimes and Batman's getting the credit for them, I suppose. So
yeah, I mean, it starts off where it's blamed on the Batman.
Yeah.
And then she faces Carmine Falcone and scratches him across the face. And again, she's an assistant of the Batman.
Yeah.
And this really begins to kind of grate with her about, that moment at Carmine Falcone's where he is essentially setting up the guy to kidnap Barbara Gordon and her newborn baby to use as leverage against Jim Gordon. Batman says, "Thanks, you've just ruined my investigation in terms of like surveillance of Carmine Falcone."
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
that ultimately is the last then we see of
Catwoman.
Catwoman in the movie.
Absolutely. Then it leads on to Gordon being set up by Falcone's men and by Commissioner Loeb. Gordon arrives to a parking lot again, much like at the beginning of the film when he's attacked and set upon by the GCPD agents that he isn't following. Yet this time it's that the Falcone's men have his newborn son and his wife held captive, and he has to make the decision whether he lets them go, taking his wife and son with them, or whether he takes action then and there. And Jim realizes that even if he lets them go, his wife and child are dead. So he takes the action to attack Falcone's men. But they still take away his son.
They manage to escape the parking lot, but Bruce Wayne is there on a bike.
Well, that's the thing.
That is part. Yeah. Actually, that's part of the story. I'm kind of like, okay, is he? So he has been sort of mounting this surveillance operation, and he's there, and he must just be there in the background. And then he comes up and actually. Jim Gordon then just knocks him off the bike, takes the bike, and chases after.
Jim thinks it's one of Falcone's men.
Yeah.
But then they have the worst scene of transfer from a comic book to a film. And generally, I think the film is pretty good in doing what they did. But they have the worst scene right here, where Bruce is knocked off the bike by Gordon, gets up with no bike helmet on, with no mask, with no Batman gear. And talks to Barbara, but looks as if he has his face painted black so that she can't see who it is.
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's apparently the lights above that are obscuring his face when she's standing there staring directly into it. It's completely unbelievable in terms of everything else that's gone on, and the story is quite well done. But it's totally unbelievable that a woman could be standing directly in front of him with the lights above his head and could not see his face.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that. It's kind of transferred like that.
Yeah.
I suppose, but I mean, it is what it is, and I mean, ultimately, it leads to a chase down, to a bridge over the river.
Mm-hmm. And Gordon then shoots the tires out from underneath the henchman's car, kills one of the henchmen who's driving the car, but the henchman holding his son is still alive.
Yeah. The mobsters and the public officials who are as corrupt and bent as anything, are scrambling to take down essentially an ethical cop who is willing to investigate corruption within the department of the GCPD. And it's the meeting of that with what Batman is trying to do, which is essentially to clean up the streets, where in some cases the police have been hamstrung, really, because they're investigating themselves.
Yep.
At least to the point where Batman saves the child of the guy who he's going to work with in further cleaning up the streets of Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
And you get this really great scene where Batman is diving down to try and catch the baby before he hits the river.
Sorry, Jim's son is accidentally dropped off the side of the Gotham Bridge, and Bruce saves him on the fall as Gordon and the Falcone henchmen are falling as well. And Bruce saves him, and there's a great exchange there where essentially Gordon has broken his glasses and looks up at Bruce in the sunlight with no glasses and says, "I'm practically blind wearing these things." So is that an indication that Gordon knows who he is, but will keep the secret?
Yeah.
Is this the start of a relationship, a different relationship than we had in the past with Gordon and Batman, where actually Gordon knows exactly who Batman is? Or is Gordon actually blind? Is he actually unable to see? It's an interesting one.
It's a better way than what happens in the car park with Barbara.
Absolutely.
To say, I'm practically blind without my glasses. Your secret's safe with me because actually you're just a pile of fuzz in my vision. They seem to hit a mud bank from the bridge, and they seem to be perfectly all right. Now, I'm quite convinced that if I fell from a bridge that height, I would probably be like a Rubik's Cube. I would be a nice square block or something. But apparently, they're perfectly all right, except for the henchmen.
There is still just the matter of the overall wrapping up of the story. Flass, he's taken notes on everything that Loeb has done over the previous years, including time, dates, everything, which ends off taking down Loeb, the commissioner of Gotham. Loeb takes Brandon down with him because he's not going to go down alone. And then we get the reveal that there's someone poisoning the water tanks of Gotham, calling himself the Joker, leading into a new relationship between Jim and his new best friend. I think we can guess who that is.
Yeah, and a really good transfer to essentially the Joker. You could even argue then Killing Joke is quite a nice little story to have that fills in that ending of Batman Year One.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So overall, what do you think of the movie?
My view is that I would definitely recommend. I think I would recommend it in conjunction with reading the graphic novel because they are very similar, almost sort of pane by pane. Yes, there are some aspects of the animated movie that are definitely, you could say, comic booky, such as this idea that they both, there's, the baby, Bruce Wayne, Jim Gordon, and Falcone's henchman fall off the bridge. It would appear Falcone's henchman just disappears, but the other three obviously survive and seem to be perfectly okay after falling off a suspension bridge. But
a suspension of belief bridge. Then.
But yeah, it's a suspension of belief bridge, exactly. But it's
remember, the Falcone's henchman has also just been in a car crash as well. So,
well, exactly. He's had but
he's a bad guy.
But it's a comic book story. Okay, those little quibbles. You only introduced to Selina Kyle. The focus of this story is very much on Jim Gordon, actually. I even think so more than the Batman. For that, I think, in relation to Gotham TV show, even, it's a recommend because you get to see Jim Gordon and his relationship with people within the police department or how he tackles corruption, which might be quite informative for the TV show. So, if are we doing it out of 5 or are we doing it out of 10?
I think we do it out of 5.
Do it out of 5? I would
but you can use
say 3.5 sheriff stars out of 5 to 4. Yeah, okay. I'm kind of torn. I would say 4 sheriff stars out of 5, but maybe it's 3.5. 3.5.
Okay. Interesting.
But to me, that's a recommend, as as you would say.
Yeah. For me, overall, it comes down to choice. If you're a comic book reader and you haven't read Batman Year One, read it. Go buy it. Go get it. The animated film is fine. Is good. But you get to pore over the panels a lot more when you're reading the comic book. There's not a huge amount of difference in the story, but there's the special thing about a comic is that you get to put your own impression and your own voices on the characters, your own ideas on the characters. They do a good job of translating this. But for me, I would be a little lower in rating it. I'd probably be a 3.1, 3.2 kind of review. Still a recommend. Still worth watching. If you want to just catch up on a good story about Jim Gordon, because it is about Jim Gordon with a little bit of the creation of the Batman and the creation of Catwoman. But overall, I do feel it's a little bit like, as I said, a motion comic where there's not a huge amount of the animation to specifically go and watch it for the animation. Go read the book.
Yeah. And just one final thing is Bryan Cranston brings an awful lot to Jim Gordon. I mean,
agree.
It's a really, essentially Jim Gordon in this is a bit of an anti-hero. Yes, he's a hero at the end of the day, but there are things along the way where, it's not that straight break between black and white or good and evil. He's a complex character, and the same way that Ben McKenzie does actually with Bruce Wayne and Batman. I suppose the main thing is that certainly you're much more familiar with that break. Whereas with Jim Gordon, I think you knew him as the police guy who had the ethical moral compass. And this brings out that, yes, he does, but he's not infallible. He's not necessarily an angel. Yeah. And Bryan Cranston does a really good job of doing that, and certainly in those monologues. And I do think as well that Ben McKenzie is very good at doing the brooding sense of Batman that we're certainly very much accustomed to. So again, I think it still stands. I'd say 3.5 for me, 2.4 Sheriff stars. So yeah,
I'm not going to use the Sheriff stars. I was trying to think of a. Is there a?
I'm trying to keep the police theme going here.
Is there a Batarang? Maybe 4 Batarangs out of 5. Maybe?
I'm trying to keep the police thing going.
Possibly. Okay, thanks for joining us for our review of Batman Year One. I hope you enjoyed it. I suppose some of the other kind of pieces to talk about are just how we think this is kind of going to play into the Gotham TV show. There's obviously some kind of template there. There's obviously some of the characters that we have
exactly.
That are going to play out in a similar way, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, like in terms of characters, will Harvey Bullock potentially be a Flash character, for example? Yeah. Or is Detective Flash still to be cast? You have a police structure there. There must be a commissioner, but we've not had any indication as to any casting regarding a commissioner. Yeah. Will it be kind of someone behind a closed door that kind of never get to hear about, and maybe is the bad guy that you never get to see, the person in the shadows? Or will we get some information over the coming weeks or months that may suggest that someone will be cast for a commissioner role? Yeah. And that would be really interesting to see.
Absolutely.
But I think then, moving away from the cast in that sense, it would be just the general feel of the Frank Miller graphic novel, and that the animated movie is just this one of sheer corruption that is rife throughout the city at all levels of public office, it being in the pockets of the gangsters. And obviously, casting so far, it's all about gangsters. It's Fish Mooney is a gangster. Yeah. Even Oswald Cobblepot is a low-level mobster within Gotham, working for Fish Mooney. So that idea of, is it that Fish Mooney has the influence that stretches out into the GCPD where Jim Gordon is coming? It's a really interesting thing to see whether that might sort of inform season 1, for example, or the TV show.
The TV show is obviously casting Jim Gordon as a younger actor, a younger character than we see in this book. In this book, there's numerous references to, in the past this is the way I would have done it many, many times. Whereas it looks like this Jim Gordon isn't going to be a man of as much experience. But overall, I think the kind of structure of the Jim Gordon aspect of the story, the structure of the mafia or the criminal element of the story, and the structure of the police department in the story are things they can absolutely draw on as inspiration.
Yeah, and ultimately, Batman is always seen as the anti-hero. He's a complex. There's these straight down the line motives don't apply to him. Is it vengeance? Is it for the good of Gotham? Is it a altruistic thing, or is it for his own personal need? And similarly, without Batman, as we discussed in our first episode, how does Gotham work without Batman? Is it that Jim Gordon, as we reviewed and described from the animated movie Batman Year One, how will Jim Gordon be viewed? Will he be that anti-hero? Yes, he has an ethical, moral centre, certainly within his work, but what shades of grey are we going to see of Jim Gordon? Will, for example, we know that there's Barbara Keene, we know that there is a Captain Essen, so they are being brought in. Will there be some kind of love triangle going on there, where you then also see this less clear-cut Jim Gordon, where he has his foibles as well, and he isn't just a straight-down-the-line cop doing good, goes back to the family, and so on, or in this case his fiancée, and that's that. There is more of a depth to that character.
Yeah. No, it's going to be really interesting to see. This is our first review episode, so I'm delighted you joined us for it. I'm really interested to hear your feedback.
Yeah, again, thank you guys for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed our discussions. We really would like to hear from you about some of your comments and thoughts on Batman Year One. Do you think it might be some kind of reference for Gotham TV show? What kind of things, if you've read the graphic novel or you've looked at the animated movie, what things stand out for you from the movie? What do you like? Maybe what do you not like quite as much? Just remember that we would love to hear from you. We really want you to become a part of this discussion that we have and be a part of the community in relation to the Gotham TV show. With that, you can always connect with us on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. Just search for Gotham TV Podcast, or you can visit our website at gothamtvpodcast.com. You're more than welcome to leave a comment on the website and get in touch. If you want to leave a review, you're more than welcome, and we really appreciate the feedback with what we're discussing. And maybe even if you want to provide any suggestions, that also would be more than taken on board, and we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So next up, we're going to be talking through Gotham Central. This is another project that looked at Gotham Central PD as the I suppose the focus point of a comic series. It was hugely well received critically, but not very well, I suppose, bought by the public. A series created by Ed Brubaker and by Greg Rucka. We're going to be looking at the first 3 arcs of the comics, so that takes us up to about issue 10. Get reading, and hopefully we'll talk to you in 2 weeks' time.
So thank you very much for joining us, and just to remember that all 3 episodes so far are now available on iTunes, Stitcher, or any other good podcasting catcher from Android. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Bye.